Hello and welcome to the online public open house for the KYOVA 2050 Multimodal Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. Thank you for your interest in this planning process. This presentation will start with introducing the Kentucky-Ohio-West Virginia Interstate Planning Commission, also known as KYOVA, and explaining the agency's role in transportation planning. We will then provide information about long-range transportation planning, including a description of what types of information and analysis will be included in the updated MTP and the anticipated timeline to complete the update. Finally, we will provide more information about how you can provide input and stay informed and engaged throughout the planning process. Formally organized in 1968, KYOVA serves as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, and Transportation Management Agency, or TMA, for the tri-state area of West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. Federal law requires the formation of MPOs for urbanized areas with populations over 50,000 and TMAs for urbanized areas with populations over 200,000. The role of the MPO and the TMA is to ensure regional coordination in the transportation planning process and the allocation of federal transportation funding. This plan will meet the requirements of the current federal transportation legislation, Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, also known as the FAST Act. As the designated MPO for the Huntington, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio urbanized area, KYOVA is required by federal law to prepare a long-range transportation plan and update the plan every 4 years. The MTP is a comprehensive plan that considers all users of the transportation system, including evaluating the mobility needs for individuals as well as freight across all transportation modes. The next several slides will provide more detailed information about the overall planning process and the elements that will be included in the 2050 MTP. KYOVA will work with an advisory group to establish goals and objectives for the MTP. These elements will be used to help set priorities in order to evaluate and prioritize plan recommendations. The development of goals and objectives for the 2050 MTP will consider the goals that were included in KYOVA's current long-range transportation plan, the 2040 MTP, as well as public input, stakeholder feedback, and state and federal planning goals. Federal transportation legislation requires MPOs to include a description of the performance measures and targets that will be used to assess future performance of the transportation system. In the legislation, Congress defined national goals and required the U.S. Department of Transportation to establish performance measures related to those goals. The federal performance measure rules cover highway safety, highway asset management, highway system performance, transit asset management, and public transportation safety. The performance measures will be incorporated into the MTP goals and objectives and project evaluation criteria as appropriate so that the MPO planning process aligns with national goals. Opportunities for public and stakeholder engagement will occur throughout the planning process. The public engagement program for the KYOVA 2050 MTP will include a combination of virtual and in-person activities. In addition to the online public open house that is currently underway, we plan to hold 2 in-person meetings with the public later this fall and winter if it is safe to do so. To ensure an inclusive planning process, KYOVA is also conducting targeted outreach to groups and populations that have been traditionally underrepresented in the planning process, including low-income and minority populations, as well as senior citizens, immigrant groups, and people with special mobility needs. Stakeholders will be engaged in the planning process through advisory group meetings, focus group discussions, and interviews. The advisory group will include members of KYOVA's Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Board, as well as other transportation stakeholders in the region. The advisory group will meet 3 times during the planning process to help provide guidance to the project team. The MTP will evaluate the existing transportation system along with projected changes in population and employment to identify potential transportation needs and issues. This analysis will use the most current data available, including information provided by KYOVA's partners, the West Virginia Department of Transportation, Ohio Department of Transportation, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and the local jurisdictions in the study area. The existing conditions assessment will also include a review of the plans and studies that KYOVA has prepared since the MTP was last updated in 2017. This review will capture the recommendations from the previous planning efforts and include updated status information on those recommendations. The existing conditions assessment will provide a strong foundation for plan development based on a clear understanding of current conditions and previously identified transportation needs. We will use the KYOVA travel demand model to identify areas where transportation demand is expected to exceed the capacity of the system. We will also conduct a traffic safety analysis to identify crash hotspots and other important trends related to transportation safety. We will also conduct a needs analysis to identify issues and gaps related to bicycle, pedestrian, and transit transportation in the region. Information from these analyses, along with public and stakeholder input and a review of transportation recommendations from other plans and studies, will be used to develop the preliminary projects and planning strategies that will be considered for potential inclusion in the MTP. These projects and strategies will then be reviewed, evaluated, and prioritized based on criteria related to the goals and objectives established for the 2050 MTP. Following this evaluation, KYOVA will develop more detailed descriptions and cost estimates for the multimodal projects recommended in the plan. The FAST Act requires MPOs to develop fiscally constrained long-range transportation plans. This means that the funding forecasted to be available to the MPO over the life of the plan will be sufficient to implement the plan's recommendations. KYOVA will work with the West Virginia Division of Highways, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and the Ohio Department of Transportation to estimate revenues through 2050 based on historic revenues and projected trends. The projected revenues will then be compared with the project costs to ensure that the final MTP is fiscally constrained. After the recommended projects and strategies are defined, an air quality conformity analysis will be conducted. In order to receive funding from the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, KYOVA must demonstrate that the MTP meets the transportation conformity requirements of the Federal Clean Air Act. The purpose of the air quality conformity analysis is to ensure that federal funding and approval are awarded to transportation activities that are consistent with air quality goals. The 2050 MTP process is just now getting underway. The MTP is currently in the information gathering phase of the planning process, which involves reaching out to the public and stakeholders to request input on transportation needs, as well as collecting relevant data to begin the review and analysis of the transportation system. Next, we will complete a comprehensive analysis of the existing transportation system. KYOVA will use this information, along with the public and stakeholder input, to identify needs and develop project recommendations to address those needs. KYOVA will meet with the advisory group 2 times in late 2021 and again in early 2022 to develop and evaluate those potential recommendations. After refining the recommendations, KYOVA will prepare the draft 2050 MTP document in February of 2022. Public review of the draft MTP document is anticipated to occur in March of 2022 and will include a 30-day public comment period. Following the public comment period, KYOVA will prepare a final plan for approval. The air quality conformity determination will be approved with the plan and submitted to the federal agencies for approval in April of 2022. There are several ways to provide input about the region's transportation needs. We invite you to fill out the public survey anytime between now and October 20th of 2021. A link to the survey is provided on the KYOVA 2050 MTP website. The URL for the website is KYOVA2050.com. If you prefer commenting by phone or email or would like to request additional information, please reach out to Salim Salameh, the Deputy Director for KYOVA and the Project Manager for the MTP update. Salim can be reached by phone at area code 304-523-7434 or by email at ssalameh@kyovaipc.org. Thank you for your interest in this planning process.